I was elbow deep in dishwater when it hit me. Tuesday, nothing special about it. Lily's cereal bowl, a coffee mug with a chip in the rim, lukewarm water going gray with yesterday's pasta sauce. The radio was on low in the other room, something I wasn't even really listening to. And out of nowhere, no warning, no occasion, I felt this rush. Happiness, the real kind, the kind that makes your chest feel too small for it. I stood there with my hands in dirty water and almost laughed out loud because nothing had happened. No promotion, no vacation, no milestone I could point to. Just a Tuesday, a chipped mug, and me, happier than I think I've ever been at any of the big moments in my whole life. That threw me. As a psychologist and as a woman who's lived through a few real catastrophes, I'd quietly believed happiness was supposed to arrive on schedule, after the wedding, after the promotion, after you finally earned it. And here it was, uninvited, in a kitchen that smelled like dish soap and old coffee. I didn't tell anyone about it that day. What would I even have said? The dishes made me happy? It sounded too small to mention out loud, which is exactly the problem I want to talk about today. We've been trained to only report the big stuff, the wedding, the trip, the win. Meanwhile, the actual texture of a good life, the stuff that's really holding it up, slips by completely unrecorded because it never seemed worth writing down. If you've ever been ambushed by joy in the most unremarkable 5 minutes of your week and then quietly wondered if that even counted, you're exactly who I made this one for. Welcome to Breathe and Begin. I'm Sarah, psychologist, single mom, recovering physicist, a woman who's collected more wrong turns than most people manage in 3 lifetimes. Today, I want to talk about the happiest moments of my life, the ones that actually caught me off guard, because almost none of them looked like what I'd been told happiness was supposed to look like. If anything here lands for you, tell me in the comments. I'd genuinely like to know what surprised you. And if you want more of these conversations, subscribe so we keep finding each other here. Now let me tell you what I've learned about joy, the kind nobody warns you is coming. Here's the embarrassing part. I have a PhD. I have read the literature on happiness, and somehow I still walked around for years with this private assumption that joy was a reward you collected at checkpoints. Big wedding, big joy. Big promotion, big joy. Small Tuesday, nothing. But that's not actually how it works, and most of us know it the moment we stop and think about it. There's a well-known idea in psychology called hedonic adaptation. Basically, we adjust to almost everything, good and bad, faster than we expect. The new car stops feeling new. The dream job becomes just a job. So if happiness only lived in the big arrivals, we'd be miserable most of our lives, because most of life is the unremarkable stretch between them. What actually happened at that sink wasn't an arrival, it was a noticing. And noticing, it turns out, is a completely different skill than achieving, one nobody really teaches you because there's no diploma for it, no ceremony, nothing to post a photo of. You can spend an entire life getting extremely good at achieving and never once practice the much quieter skill of just registering what's already good while it's happening. I think that's why the dishwater moment rattled me a little. Not because it was so profound, but because it proved I'd had access to this feeling all along, on a random Tuesday, and simply hadn't been paying attention on most of the other Tuesdays. Somewhere along the way, a lot of us absorbed the same quiet lie. Happiness is a finish line. Finish school, then you'll be happy. Get the relationship, then you'll be happy. I'll be happy when, fill in the blank. There's always a blank. I believed that for most of my 20s and 30s. I want it on record that I am extremely educated and still fell for it completely. The trouble with I'll be happy when is that the when keeps moving. You hit it and your brain, which is built to keep scanning for the next problem, not to sit around admiring the view, just sets a new finish line a little further out. So you're always approaching, never arriving. It's exhausting, and it's also just not true to how joy actually shows up. I see this constantly, and not just in my office. A friend gets the job she'd wanted for years and is thrilled for exactly 11 days before she's on to worrying about the next thing. A client finally gets the apology he'd waited a decade for, and it helps for an afternoon, and then ordinary life just closes back over it like water. That's not a flaw in them. That's just what happiness does when you've only ever let it live at the finish line. It can't stay there because nothing stays at a finish line. You cross it and keep walking. My mother baked bread most mornings when I was small. The whole house smelled like yeast and warmth, and there was a particular sound, the thump of dough being turned out onto flour, that I could probably still pick out blindfolded. I didn't know yet that this was happiness. I just knew I felt safe in a kitchen that smelled like that, and that nothing bad could be happening anywhere in the world while that smell was in the house. I was 12 when she got sick, and the smell of bread turned into the smell of rubbing alcohol almost overnight. I became the one who managed things, and somewhere in there I learned the most dangerous lie of my whole childhood, that strength means needing nothing, that you can't be the caretaker and also be the one who's allowed to feel good. It took me decades to notice that the bread smell kind of happiness, small, sensory, completely unearned, never actually left. I just stopped letting myself register it, the same way you can stop hearing a clock ticking in a room you've lived in long enough. At MIT, there was a Sunday, one of maybe 100 we had together, where Ben and I didn't do anything. We didn't go anywhere. The radiator clanked, the coffee was bad, and we sat on the floor of his apartment doing separate kinds of reading, occasionally reading a line out loud to each other for no reason at all. I remember being happier in that nothing afternoon than I was at our engagement dinner 3 months later, which had candles and a string quartet and every reason, on paper, to be the happier of the two. I didn't understand it then. I think I do now. Grand moments ask you to perform joy. Quiet ones just let you have it. After Ben, I built a life that looked happy from the outside, and I want to be honest about how convincing that can be, even to the person living it. Mark liked introducing me as my wife, the doctor. We had the house, the dinner parties, the right kind of busy. People would tell us how lucky we were, and I'd nod. And some part of me kept waiting to feel what I'd felt on that radiator floor with bad coffee and no plans. It never came. Because what I'd built wasn't happiness. It was the appearance of a life that should produce happiness, which is a completely different architecture, dressed up to look identical from the street. That's a pattern I see constantly in this work. A person assembling every external marker correctly, the house, the title, the photo that would make a great holiday card, and still quietly wondering, usually around 2 a.m., why none of it lands the way they were promised it would. Nobody tells you that you can do everything right by the checklist and still feel nothing when you check the last box. A client, I'll call her Renee, came in about a year after her divorce and told me something that stopped me cold. She felt guilty for being happy. She'd started painting again, something she'd given up in our 20s.
She'd laugh at something on the radio in the car, and then catch herself mid-laugh, almost apologize to the empty passenger seat, like joy without her ex-husband's permission was somehow disloyal to the marriage, even though the marriage had hurt her badly, even though he was, by her own account, relieved to be out of it too. I told her what I'll tell you. Happiness that shows up after hard things isn't a betrayal of the hard things. It's not even unrelated to them. Sometimes it's the most honest evidence you have that you're actually healing, not just surviving, that something in you is starting to trust the world again, in small, ordinary ways, before your mind has caught up enough to give it permission.
We talk a lot about how the body holds on to pain. Tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, a stomach that drops before you've consciously registered the bad news. Less talked about, the body holds on to joy the same way, if you let it. There's a simple, well-known practice called savoring, just pausing on a good moment for a few extra seconds instead of rushing past it on your way to the next task. Not a study, not a statistic, just a small thing worth trying. Next time something lands, a good meal, a kind text, sun on your face at a red light, stay in it for 5 seconds longer than feels natural. Don't reach for your phone. Don't start narrating it to yourself. Just stay. Most of us are so well trained at noticing what's wrong that we've forgotten we're allowed to notice what's right too. That it's not bragging, it's not naive, it's just paying attention to the whole picture instead of only the half that's flashing morning lights. The hardest day of my life as a mother doubled, somehow, as one of the strangest, most surprising moments of closeness I've ever had. Ethan was 7. Rain, spilled milk, a meltdown about boots. I was gripping the wheel, performing fine, and from the back seat he asked, "Mom, are you happy?" The lie caught in my throat, and I pulled over and just broke. And then a small hand landed on my shoulder. "It's okay, Mommy. You can be sad." I have never, before or since, felt more loved or more seen than I did in that exact moment, which also happened to be the worst one. I think that's the part nobody prepares you for. Joy and grief aren't opposites standing on either end of a line. Sometimes they're sitting in the same car. My office has 2 armchairs that don't match, a few plants I've somehow managed not to kill, and one photo on the wall, the Andromeda Galaxy, which my father showed me through a cheap telescope when I was a kid. Most days are ordinary in there. A client cries or doesn't. We sit with something hard for 50 minutes, and then they go back out into their actual life. But every so often, there's a moment. Someone laughs unexpectedly at their own pain, or says something true for the first time out loud, or just exhales in a way that tells you something heavy finally set down. And I feel this quiet, surprising rush of joy, right there in the room, in the middle of someone else's worst week. I used to think my happiest moments would come from my own life going well. Turns out, a lot of them come from witnessing someone else's life crack open just enough to let something in, which is a strange thing to build a career around, and also, I think, the best accident of my whole life. If you'd asked 25-year-old me to predict my happiest moments, I'd have described a wedding, a finished degree, some milestone with a banner on it. Not one of my real ones looked like that. A bad coffee sundae on a cold floor, a small hand on my shoulder during the worst phone call my body never made out loud, a chipped mug, dishwater, a Tuesday with nothing on the calendar. What surprised me every single time is that I wasn't doing anything to earn it. I wasn't performing, planning, or managing, 3 things I am, historically, extremely good at. I was just there, paying attention for once, instead of running the next item on the list. That's the whole secret, if there is one. Joy doesn't seem to wait for permission, and it definitely doesn't wait for you to deserve it. It just needs you to actually be present when it shows up, which is a much harder ask than it sounds like. Which frankly is annoying for someone who likes to plan things. I would have loved a 5-year happiness roadmap. I got dishwater instead, but I'll take it. I stood there a long time, hands going wrinkled in cold water, doing absolutely nothing to deserve the feeling I was having, and I let myself have it anyway. No checklist completed, no reward unlocked, just a Tuesday, and a body that finally remembered it was allowed to feel good without an occasion. If you're waiting for your life to hit some marker before you let yourself feel that, I gently ask you to look back at this past week instead. Was there a moment, maybe 3 seconds long, that you rushed right past because nothing about it seemed big enough to count? Coffee that was, for once, exactly right. A song that came on at the right time. Someone's hand finding yours without being asked to. I'd bet there was a moment like that. I'd bet there's probably one today, too. You just haven't gotten to it yet. You don't have to build your way to happy. Sometimes you just have to notice you already are, in some unremarkable 5 minutes nobody warned you to expect. If this one found you somewhere quiet, I'd love to hear about your own dishwater moment in the comments. And if these conversations are doing something for you, stay close, subscribe, and we'll keep doing this together. Go easy on yourself today. Joy might already be standing closer than you think.